The Dinner Table Compromise by Karen Burkholder, Mallory Applegate, and Mary Conyers.
As the fledgling republic's leading diplomat, it's Jefferson's job to engage in delicate negotiations. Ironically, his first real test is a dispute right here at home. A standoff between Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton and Congressman James Madison.
Hamilton, as Secretary of the Treasury, puts forward a pretty controversial idea, which is he wants the national government to assume state debts from the Revolution. And Hamilton's thinking is, this is great because it's going to strengthen the national government and people will be looking to the national government to pay their debts. But it gets a lot of opposition in a variety of different ways. One of the people who's opposing it is Madison.
The argument grinds the new government to a halt.
Today, when we think about gridlocked government, that's not alarming to us because we assume that there are two parties and that they don't like each other and that that's what they do is fight. But in the 1790s, they're not assuming that there are national political parties. They're not assuming that that's the way the government's going to function. So when the government is deadlocked, what it means is it just can't work.
So how do they work it out? They have a wonderful, cozy dinner at Jefferson's townhouse in June of 1790, at which there is a lot of wine poured, and a conversation is had between Madison, Jefferson, and Hamilton to work out a deal.
It involves another dispute between Northerners like Hamilton and Virginia leaders like Madison and Jefferson, where the nation's capital, temporarily in New York City, should be permanently located.
Wherever you put the capital, economic power would follow. So from Jefferson's perspective, he doesn't want Hamilton's financial platform, but he wants the capital in the South. Hamilton does not want the capital in the South, but he wants Jefferson's acquiescence to the assumption of state debts.
The three men hammer out an historic agreement that breaks the deadlock and changes the course of American history.
The end result of the dinner deal is that Hamilton's assumption plan passes, and a decision is made that the national capital, after a number of years, is going to move to what will become Washington, D.C.
Even though the Senate and the House of Representatives had to vote on the financial plan, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and Thomas Jefferson were the ones that ultimately decided if the plan happened. This is because Hamilton needed the Southern states' votes to pass his plan in Congress.
Alexander Hamilton was one of our founding fathers. He went to King's College and got a degree in law. When George Washington became president, he asked Alexander Hamilton to be his Secretary of Treasury.
His plan involved a financial plan for the United States to start the repayment of debt. He realized that as a young country, for us to be successful, that we needed to pay off our debt, not only our debt to France, but also the debt we had in the country. For example, he wanted to move forward and actually pay off the individual states' debts as well, thinking that if he paid off the debt of the various states within the country, that would allow them to start fresh as a new state on a solid financial foundation and move forward and thus help the country be more prosperous economically. And it was a bit of a gamble, but actually his plan worked. And the second part of his plan, obviously, to move forward beyond that, was to pay off that debt and then also establish a national bank to actually help with the currency and pay off that debt for the country as well.
So Alexander Hamilton's financial plan involved a couple of things. But first of all, it involved the federal government taking on the debt that the states had as a result of the Revolutionary War. And part of that plan then meant the setup of a national bank. So you'd have a banking system that would then help the United States deal more with, I guess it would help its dealings with foreign countries, help its dealings with loans to other entities, but more or less, to sum it up, national banking system and taking on the debts of the states.
A national debt, if it is not excessive, will be to us a national blessing. What Hamilton meant by this is that if we have a small amount of debt, it will be beneficial to the new country.
Ironically, both founding fathers hugely influential along with Hamilton. Part of the reason they opposed Hamilton's plan is not only opposing political views a little bit, but obviously another big one was they weren't necessarily a fan of big government. And, both being from, Jefferson being from Virginia and Hamilton from New York had a little bit of difference of opinion on it as well. But that's one of the big reasons is they were just opposed to big government, having the government do too much, wanted a little bit more in states' rights.
The people against the plan are Thomas Jefferson and James Madison.
Men often oppose a thing merely because they have no agency in planning it, or because it may have been planned by those whom they dislike. Alexander Hamilton thought that Thomas Jefferson and James Madison did not like the financial plan because they did not help plan it, or because Madison and Jefferson did not like him.
Jefferson did not like the financial plan for many reasons. A couple of them are: Jefferson thought it might lead to speculation, and he also believed the power to tax people should be the state's power because it was not given to the federal government in the Constitution.
James Madison felt that the United States should not place all of its wealth in one location. Therefore, he suggested a system of many smaller banks in different parts of the country. He also argued that the idea of a central bank was unconstitutional.
When the compromise took place, the doors were closed, there was no written record, and
no one else was in the room where it happened, the room where it happened.
A little bit, being it involved Alexander Hamilton, who was serving as Secretary of Treasury under President Washington at the time. And obviously Alexander Hamilton was a huge responsibility for putting the country on a financial strong foothold, which most people don't realize. And one of the things that Hamilton was trying to push through was some of his economic reforms, paying off debt from the war, and paying off debt from not only to other countries but also within the country that we had accumulated from the Revolutionary War. And to do this and to get some of these things to go through and eventually build up to where he wanted to push to the national bank, Jefferson was opposed to this a little bit. Thomas Jefferson, founding father like Alexander Hamilton, hugely important, but believed in, he wasn't necessarily a fan of big government. Alexander Hamilton was a little bit more. And to help push these through, he needed the support of Jefferson and some people from the southern states, Virginia in particular, among others. And he couldn't get their support, and so he came up with a plan. He had a little a trump card in his pocket, as he would say, and simply to get the agreement that he wanted to, he offered them the opportunity to relocate the capital back further south to Philadelphia, and then eventually to a permanent home in what becomes Washington, D.C., making that agreement in 1791, thus allowing some of his debts to be paid off, his debt programs to go move forward and be paid off as well.
Thomas Jefferson invited Alexander Hamilton and James Madison to dinner at Jefferson's house to work out their differences on the financial plan. He also mentioned that they should be alone.
The three men decided to each get something that they wanted out of the deal. Hamilton got the Southern votes for his financial plan. Jefferson and Madison got the votes to have the nation's capital in what is now known as Washington, D.C.
If this vital compromise had not occurred, our capital may not have been where it is today. The national bank may not have existed for a while, or existed at all. The United States might not have the debt plan that it does. This might affect global trade also, since the United States is often considered a trading superpower. All of these things and more could have happened if the dinner table compromise had not occurred.
No one else was in the room where it happened, the room where it happened, the room where it happened. No one really knows they displayed.